Spin-offs are not a rare thing in any media nowadays, and it's no different with video games. However, there are times when these spin-offs become so huge that they grow into a new franchise, and that seems to happen quite often with JRPGs. So today I'll talk about this franchise that originated from other series and how some of these became even bigger than their original counterparts. So let's begin. The first one is the Mana series. This is a series that got its independence really early. The first game released for Game Boy wasn't actually conceived to be a spin-off originally, but due to some circumstances during its creation, it ended up being rebranded as a Final Fantasy spin-off and received some elements from the series, like the Chocobo and some sprites that look a lot like classic NES Final Fantasy sprites. The name of the first game in the series was also a hell of a mess. In Japan, it was called Seiken Densetsu Final Fantasy Gaiden, but in the US it became simply Final Fantasy Adventure, while in Europe it was called Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which should not be confused with the other game that's actually called Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. They're not the same thing. However, the second title in the franchise, this time on the SNES, was simply named Seiken Densetsu 2 in Japan and Secret of Mana in the West, and it started to build its own universe and lore, abandoning all references to the Final Fantasy universe and becoming a full-fledged series on its own. Trails series. This one's an inception of spin-offs. Today, the long-running Trails series is famous for being an extensive storyline spanning dozens of games starting with the first Trails in the Sky, which even had a remake announced some time ago, and then going through multiple story arcs with Trails to Zero, Trails of Cold Steel and Trails through Daybreak. But initially, it was part of Falcon's Legend of Heroes series. Back when the first Trails in the Sky released, its full name was actually Legend of Heroes 6 Trails in the Sky. But this is where it goes even deeper. The Legends of Heroes franchise by itself was already a spin-off from the older Dragon's Lair series. Dragon's Lair is one of the oldest Falcon games, if not the oldest, and it's responsible for spawning two of Falcon's current franchises, the Legends of Heroes and the lesser-known Xanadu series. Long story short, it started off as Dragon's Lair. On the 6th Dragon's Lair game, the Legend of Heroes franchise was born, and then on the 6th Legend of Heroes game, the Trails series came to be and became Falcon's most successful franchise along with Ys. Mystery Dungeon series. Now, I know Mystery Dungeon is not exactly a JRPG series, it's more on the roguelike side, but many of its installments has a lot of JRPG elements, and there's a good reason for that. Today, this franchise is well known for its crossover with Pokémon, but the truth is that Mystery Dungeon is way older than that. And the first entry in the series was actually a Dragon Quest spin-off called Torneco's Great Adventure for the SNES back in 1993. As the name implies, it focused on Torneco, the good-willed merchant from Dragon Quest IV, as he explored the Mystery Dungeon in search for treasure. Ever since then, the Mystery Dungeon evolved and it got its independence with Shiren the Wanderer, and new games are released periodically. Not only that, but the series also reached popularity through other crossovers besides Pokémon. It also featured Final Fantasy with the Chocobo's Dungeon series, and even Etrian Odyssey. The Mystery Dungeon series, however, never rejected its Dragon Quest origins and went on to get Torneco's Adventure 2 and 3 and even Yango's Mystery Dungeon, featuring everyone's favorite Gov from Dragon Quest VIII on the PS2. Persona. Possibly the most famous franchise in this list and also a case of a spin-off becoming greater in popularity than its parent series. Persona is actually one of the many franchises that spawned from the Shin Megami Tensei series, and the only one that became so popular that most younger fans doesn't even know about the series' turbulent start in the West, with one of the worst localizations ever made for the first Persona game and the second game in the series, Persona 2 Innocent Sin, being left a Japan exclusive for years. Actually, to be honest, the entire Shin Megami Tensei series faced some hardships in the West, and it was only in the PS2 era that we finally started to get all of the SMT games, including Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, the Masterpiece Digital Devil Saga, the Raidoku Tsunoha sub-series from the Devil Summoner series, and finally Persona 3 and 4, both elevating the franchise to one of the most important in the genre and growing so much in popularity to even drop the Shin Megami Tensei name from their titles later on. Bravely Default. If you watched my video about Bravely Default series, you already know how it started. If not, I'll try to keep the long story short here. From the sequence of Final Fantasy remakes for the Nintendo DS came the spin-off called Final Fantasy: The Four Heroes of Light. What would be the sequel to this spin-off had so much more personality than a mere spin-off that ended up becoming a new series on its own, which is Bravely Default. And that is easily noted if you pay attention to how many Final Fantasy elements are present in the Bravely Default games even to this day. And in my opinion, the Bravely series even carry more of the Final Fantasy DNA than the modern Final Fantasy games. Nier. Another really popular franchise on this list, but the matter here is that Nier Automata gets all the credit usually, with a lot of fans not even knowing it was the second full game in the Nier series or even that it started as a Drakengard spin-off. For those who don't know, Drakengard is a Musou-like game released back in the PlayStation 2. It was a crazy game in many aspects, with a less than impressive combat system. But I really love this game either way, I'd say it's one of the best worst games in my opinion. Still, it had some very wacky ideas and a very mature and complex plot. One of the most important parts of the game was that it had many different endings. One of them led to its sequel, Drakengard 2, but the other one, literally the craziest one, led to the first Nier game, released for the PS3 and the Xbox 360. This kind of blurs the line between spin-off and actual sequel, but since the Drakengard series and the Nier series feature different gameplay, themes and rarely mention one another, I think it's safe to consider it more of a spin-off than a sequel after all. Just like the Persona and the SMT series, Nier also gained much more popularity than Drakengard, making it another case of the spin-off overshadowing the parent series. Also, if you only played Automata, give a chance to Replicant, it also deserves love, and a lot. So, as I said in the beginning, new series being born from spin-offs is a common thing in the JRPG genre, and I presented only 6 examples here, but I know there are many others. Did you already know about all of these ones? Do you know any other series that started like this? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet.